Welcome to the February 3 Curriculum Committee meeting at MSAD11. This is live streamed and you can watch it later recorded. Introductions, we'll start on this end.
Tony V.
Megan Carlson.
Linda Caputo, administrators.
Angela Hardy, Director of Curriculum. Terry McGuire is running the system.
All right.
Thanks for being here. Thanks, Tony, for stepping in.
Absolutely.
Allows us to have a quorum and then we can conduct business and vote.
And we can keep our business moving.
Yeah, and today is especially important because our first topic is the program of studies. And I think some of you have been with us long enough to know that the approval of the program of studies allows us then to move forward for planning for next year and 8th grade open house, 8th grade course registration, high school course registration, which happens even though we're months away from the fall. We actually do start the process in March. So getting approval here and then Thursday's board meeting will be really helpful to us if, contingent upon approval, to us being able to move that process forward annually. So we started last month by going over the social studies part of the program of studies and approving that because there were some changes. And we went over the math program of studies. So we're going to
And
not.
then foreign language, we looked at.
And we looked at world languages textbook requests.
Right.
So we've done almost half of it. So today we're going to look at first a couple specific course requests. Then we'll go into the program of studies and I'll just have you'll see the highlights. It's all in track pages. It's all red for new and strike out for removal. And we'll kind of monitor that so that you can ask any questions you want. So your packet is set up so that we can go through this in order together with the new senior English courses. So we're going to start with English. And what you have before you is sort of, it's very similar to the social studies proposal last month. That we are generally determining that in English last year, we created a differentiated course, same content, slower pace. So that was what social studies sort of offered. This is now they're saying because of our staffing model, because of our enrollment, the English department would like to be able to think more creatively about some of their electives that they haven't been able to teach in a number of years. And so we talked a lot about where the flexibility is within the curriculum. And then they thought creatively that senior English, the year when students are starting to think about their next steps, there could be an opportunity for thinking about course structure differently to increase engagement, like sustain them through the senior year, and also give the teachers a chance to be a little more creative in some of their teaching while still attending to the critical standards they need to teach. So that's what this proposal sort of goes through. And they analyzed like historical engagement with electives and picked ones based on their expertise as an English department. And they, instead of just like senior English or AP or applied communications, they wanted to create a 2-semester or 2 courses that are semester based. And by doing that, students can start to puzzle together their senior year, and I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. So they created one called the Examined Life, and it's really about integrating philosophy and the graphic novel and film. So that's the engaging part of it, right? The 3 areas of expertise that they really have in that department, some of the 3. And weaving that together by looking at kind of like the meaning of life, right? From a personal perspective, but grounded in like philosophers grounded in communication strategies, formal and informal. The graphic novel is one, screen as another, written form as another, narrative through philosophy as another. And then it goes through like critical aspects of storytelling, using the 4 key standards: reading, language, listening and speaking, and writing. And then students will also be able to have some self-selected reading. So there's some choice there, but structure is in how they respond to text, which is a really critical skill. So that's that course that they're offering. And then the other semester-based course would be the power of storytelling. So that's really taking creative writing, which students have a lot of interest in. Public speaking, which we actually know we need a lot of development in public speaking skills for students. And so they've been embedding that in other areas, but wanting to really hone it that senior year. And sort of like that theater arts element, which they don't typically bring in, but through story, the theater arts through story. And honestly, that's where they'll bring a lot of the fun in. It says mastering the monologue, scene study, play performance. So again, broken up into different units. One of the things they're thinking about is, depending on when these courses are taught and who might have an assigned study hall during that block, they may swap each other out, because like one person's particularly good at graphic novel. So like the core teacher might be Mr. Colwell, but then during the graphic novel unit, he may actually swap out for a few weeks and let Ms. Gingras come in and teach the graphic novel unit because she just loves it so much. Or they'll just co-plan together behind the scenes. There'll always be the primary teacher of record, but they may actually have some flexibility in who engages the students, which is really kind of fun. They're hoping it helps sustain students longer through that senior year. They're hoping it creates some flexibility. If a student has failed a course and needs a credit makeup, they can access these as well, especially semester-based rather than the whole year. The limitations, of course, is the loss of elective courses that they've already been realizing. And so they're trying to be creative to kind of recapture some of that experience again. And then in order to mitigate the issue around scheduling, these courses aren't, you have to take one and then the other, right? So you could take them in either order, or you can mix and match, and I'll show you where to find that viewpoint. And then I had them conduct an enrollment analysis to make sure there's time and space within their workload based on our projected enrollment. And I've reviewed, and then who might have to retake courses, the types of sections, and can they manage this with their available workload as a staffing unit within appropriate class sizes? And the answer is yes. So they've done all that work, and that's evidenced here by the charts that you see before you. To just give you a quick view, if you look at page 6 in the program of study that's drafted afterwards, you'll see a table.
Which, let me see, okay, got it.
Yeah. And that table really helps you, especially for senior years, see what the options are for seniors. So it's right here, yep.
Yeah.
So applied communications would go from 1 year to 1 semester. And how they've explained that to me is like, you learn all your skills in applied communications first semester, and then they apply them in projects second semester anyway. So they're going to keep applied communications as the core 1 semester. And then second semester, there's a lot of project-based learning in these 2 senior semester courses. Students could say, I want then second semester to be the exam in life, or I want second semester to be power of storytelling. So they're giving students a little bit more flexibility and choice in how that year looks for them than they have historically. Or they can combine the 2 semester-based courses in either order and take that for the year. Or they can take dual enrollment course sequence through Thomas College. And there's no title, they're just called EH 111 and 221. Or they can take one semester of dual enrollment, 111, and they could pick one of the senior semester courses and not take the second semester of dual enrollment. Think spring, sometimes they're not really wanting to take the
After
college
they've
level
done one.
course. Yep. Or they can take an AP course. We recommend English literature in their senior year or seminar, but they can take language and composition out of sequence if they really want to, even though it's recommended. And that would meet their requirements. So we're trying to really think about the student choice, create the flexibility. A staffing unit that has felt pretty impacted by the staffing reductions over time, helping them generate some energy around what and how they teach based on their like passions and expertise in their field of study. And I feel like this is a really nice compromise. Any questions?
So these two classes that they're suggesting, the power of storytelling and the examine live, are these classes that have been offered before and have been popular, or are these brand new?
So they used to offer just like a senior English class, and so that's not being offered. The components of each of these proposed classes are electives that were popular.
Okay,
So they did look at like where was the student interest? And how might, by looking at that student interest profile where we've offered classes historically, how might they become a semester-based course? And they could have just offered one as a semester-based course, but they started really looking at like, what is the arc of a student's journey? How would we capture the most interest? How would we capitalize on our skill set to make like a through line? So that's where they created this like, well, students might not want to take an entire semester of philosophy or senior English, but they might want to dabble in it. So where's the through line? So they're kind of getting a taste of things that if they go to college, they could be like, oh, I did a little bit of philosophy. I kind of actually want to go into sociology or philosophy
Right,
courses, or theater, but they're getting core English requirements still, right? They're getting that foundational core. They'll be reading, they'll be writing, they'll be critiquing and analyzing and discussing all the same things, but just through a more creative lens.
I think that's great.
I agree. Yeah, I really appreciate, obviously recognizing there's reasons that, right, we made the change to have one less English position. Actually really profound to see the impact on the availability of courses, which is sobering. The other piece though is that I like what this brings back is where that student interest lies, like, right, that feels new to me, actually kind of recognizing that level of like, that student interest is there and they do want to learn. I absolutely want to support engaging that, right, capitalizing on that. And as much as, again, that idea that faculty, it's really healthy to you know, have ways to kind of play with how you're delivering curriculum, have fun, keep it fresh and new, in that sense, or I think opinion of that. So it makes a lot of sense to me. I'm really grateful that you and they've been able to figure out ways to deliver more content, areas of interest, creatively, and yeah, with the faculty available.
Under one of the electives where it struck out writing center, that may actually come back. It's actually it would be run through the library rather than the English department, but we just haven't been able to generate enough student interest because it's like student coaches as writing center support. And so we're gonna do a little more work around writing and then try to resurrect that concept. So that's not because of staffing, that's just the generating, we don't have enough student interest right now, but we're gonna try to revisit that.
To sort of be the tutor or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments about senior English?
No.
Okay, so in that case, I'd like to kind of keep going in order of this first, like seeing if you're going to approve this, then go to the science one and then go into the full program of studies. Even though I referenced the program of studies for context, is that all right?
Yes.
Okay, so is there a motion to accept the new senior English courses as described?
I would make a motion to accept those courses as described in the program of studies.
Great, is there a second?
I'll second.
Great, and a vote. In favor? Unanimous?
And just to clarify, I think my role here is actually so that we have a quorum, so we can work as a committee, and I'm here actually acting as chair because our chair is not available. She's
Right, as board chair.
so I'm acting in that capacity.
Thank you, Tony, for clarifying. Otherwise we don't have a meeting and we have to delay this.
Wait, yeah.
Super. Okay, so then the next one is the literacy science courses. So this will look a lot like the social studies that we did last month. This is written up very similarly. We are finding that despite all of our best efforts, which we are making significant progress in student reading proficiency and writing proficiency, to be clear, and data suggests that. It isn't surprising that while that progress is being made, there's a group of students that are in the upper end of our continuum that are still demonstrating some significant gaps in their proficiency of reading in particular. And so what we're trying to do is create opportunities or pathways for them that they feel like they're getting the proper support and still being expected to learn as close to grade level as absolutely possible, right? So it's building that gap, making sure the environment is conducive for them to be learning and that they're not just able to sit back in the room and kind of hide out, right? That we're drawing them out, using some expertise from our staff to build their skill set explicitly and deliberately. So this literacy science course really goes to say, like, they've done a lot of work in analyzing student data, and that in science, there's a lot of interpreting scientific texts, analyzing data and visual representations, applying scientific vocabulary, writing evidence-based explanations, executing multi-step lab procedures. So where students are struggling with those, we need targeted instruction so that we can fill the gaps that are persisting as they show up in the science department. And so what we're finding is the range of proficiency that students are coming in with is vast. And in science, which is typically a very technical literacy environment, right? So it's a lot of new words, a lot of language that's not common and familiar, a lot of need for some direct instruction on how to access and navigate that language and then understand how that applies to content. So they've tried a few different things over the last couple of years, and we're sort of narrowing it down to a proposal, just a proposal, hopefully not for a long-term solution. This is hopefully for short-term, as in a few years or less. And what they'd like to do is figure out where the name of this, I know the name, and it's in science, but I'll call it a literacy-based science course specifically at the biology level. So we have an exploratory science course that, much like Unified Social Studies, was approved last year, that allows a unique group of students to access science on a 3-year rotation: physical science, life science, earth and space science. It's a very small population of students. They get 1 to 2 science teachers, actually. It can be really engaging. There's a lot of flexibility. That's already in the course program of studies. We don't have to offer that in a year where we don't have students who qualify for it. But if we do have students who qualify for it, and it's a very specific criteria. This is basically saying at the biology, we have on-grade level biology and we have honors biology. What they'd like to offer is the same thing social studies is doing. It's called the Lab Biology Plus, which is basically we're going to really intensely focus on literacy skills while achieving lab biology. And that way, if students happen to have this class and or other literacy enriched classes, they're going to be really intensely building their skill set in literacy, which is the key. We know that it's a cornerstone skill set to navigating life in general, right? And so they want to be able to offer this section. And for students to access it, they do have to have some standardized test data and recommendations from teachers, both, not just one or the other, in order to get in. We've done a really nice job in science, making some shifts the last couple of years that created a little bit more flexibility with staffing and workload. So there's always a concern when you add in like one section of something or a couple sections of one particular type of course, because that limits your staffing and workload. So they did analyze that here too, and they strongly believe that they can manage that. And so in here, it's their current sections. We don't have all of our our first year science sections realized yet because we haven't had 8th grade course enrollments. But that's investigating science, and that's not what we're focusing on in this proposal. It's really focusing on biology level, is having a literacy level course at the biology level to try to stem the tide so that then they might be able to access one of our chemistry sections more efficiently without changing chemistry. Does that make sense?
I saw that it said there'll be flexibility in the class, so if all of a sudden it clicks,
Yes.
or the remediation and the extra work has made great strides, that they can transfer out at the end of the semester.
Yes, that was a requirement, and that's same in social studies. So if we're seeing that all of a sudden their proficiency is really picking up, especially, they've had these intensive experiences across content areas. It might just be this content area. Remember, we make it determination per course, not universally. Yes, they can then go from lab biology plus just to lab biology on grade level, right? And that will be reflected in their transcript as well, which is great.
That it would be a different
Yeah,
class at that point. I mean,
yeah,
Different instructor, probably.
possibly, yeah. I think it's always nice if we can match the instructor, but it all depends on like the block, right? So it probably would be a different instructor. But they work closely together in the department, so they know and help with the transition. But they could totally go into the on grade level course second semester if they ended up proving successful.
If they stayed in the Lab Bio Plus, that was just like the level that was working for them, that'll still count as
Yes.
the bio credit.
And they're still conducting
Right.
labs, which was also a critical question I had,
Okay.
because it has to count as that 1 year of lab, a lab's one of their 1 year, so that we're not limiting students from accessing community college or other college opportunities because they didn't have enough lab science, right? So they will have labs just like any other labs. They just might have a little bit, their text might be modified a little and then scaffolded over time, so it increases in complexity as they get better and better at things. So that's their proposal.
Any thoughts, if I can ask, so it sounds like if not enough people sign up or students qualify for it, we'd still need to offer lab bio to all the students. They would all just demonstrate, hey, we can all handle this. They're all gonna be at on grade level.
Yeah,
So the teacher would then just kind of shift gears between one or the other.
right. And if there is super low enrollment, then we probably would try to organize them so they're in the same section within ed tech support,
Yeah.
right? So there's at least 2 adults in the room to help with that differentiation at an on grade level, if there's not enough to run the course. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like this is a kind of an ongoing piece that.
Yeah, they're trying really, they gave it the old college try for sure. They just, everyone is invested in these students and we want them to be successful. We're not lowering the bar. That's the key. I think it's just about allowing time and space to modify some of the materials that the students are having access to build their confidence and their skill set, and then increase that as efficiently as possible, as close to grade level, so that they can have the chance, whether it's in the semester or after a year going into college, college chem.
Right, they can be confident there
Yeah.
next year. I also really appreciate, again, the creativity that, that you and the faculty have put into creating this, I think.
Yeah, they've really taken off with it. I just set some conditions and then they use their creativity and to figure out if it worked and to analyze the workload, which is always a big thing.
Yeah.
Takes a while to go through that.
I understand there's probably not a set number, but what do you consider the maximum that you would like to see in a class? Because I'm looking at the English and it was like 18-ish and maybe at 21.
So we have a class size policy.
Okay,
And at the high school, I think it's up to 25 is your maximum class size,
Okay.
with the exception of like band and chorus. There's a couple of exceptions in the policy. And we don't like to have classes lower than 10, and ideally it's somewhere around 16 to 18. There's always an exception to the rule, but we do follow the policy, try to follow the policy. They're, as you can see in here, they're trying to consider the class size policy when they're thinking about class sizes. So acceptance of this, or since it seems like you don't have a lot of concerns.
I would make a motion to accept the science courses in this.
For what, for bio?
Not
bio literacy focus.
Yes.
I'll second it again.
Great. And any info in favor? Unanimous? Great, so now we've gone through now most of the department. So we're gonna look at this program of studies. We've gone through English, I'm gonna go inward. We've gone through English already. We've gone through social studies last month. We're gonna skip that. We went through math last month. Look at us being efficient. We just looked at science. So the only change was the one we just adjusted. And they have an elective here, a marine biology elective. If it enrolls enough students. In world language, last month, we tentatively approved textbook purchases as long as it fits the overall budget. Their electives here, a couple of these, they say they're new, but they didn't run, so they got proposed as new again. It just enrollment didn't. So you can see here, there are 4 electives that they're proposing. Again, those are if students end up wanting to enroll in them and it fits within the schedule for students and staff. But they're on the books. If you have any questions about those, you can find their descriptions further on. Then our multilingual learner interventions, we did move from the English department into the world language department, because that is where our one of our multilingual educators part-time is working out of world language. And so we've had our other district-wide multilingual educator also working collaboratively with that department. It just made more sense. Visual and performing arts, there's a couple changes there. They explicitly called out the fact that students exhibiting their art will happen at the art extravaganza that we do annually. They just mentioned that. There are a couple classes in here that instead of printmaking and mixed media that Meg would like to try to offer if there's availability in the schedule and student interest, specifically fantasy illustration and creature design. You've probably seen a little bit of
Pretty
that,
hot
a
right
taste
now.
of that, yeah, and you've tasted it at the art extravaganza where you saw some of the students' individual projects that had a little bit, there was some of that around on tables. And then upcycled art studio. So those are described there. With art, students need, visual and performing arts, they need a credit and they have choices, like, so we're just trying to create some space for that. And they also are proposing adding home economics as an elective. This is a new thing for us. It's called Foundations for Independent Living. This is the proposal for the course. We don't exactly have everything worked out in terms of we have some interested staff who would like to do it as an elective, but there's a few behind the scenes things we gotta kind of work out in terms of making sure that we can offer this, but the first step is always to get it approved in the program of studies, and then we can go from there, especially for something as an elective, whereas earlier I was sharing a lot of core courses where that's really where our energy needed to be. There's been, both at the middle school and the high school, students expressing a lot of interest in trying to build some skills around home economics. So specifically practical skills, knowledge and habits required for independent living and a responsible adulthood. Food preparation, nutrition, basic hand sewing, personal finance, which we do have specific courses on, but just if there's things that come up with that.
Yep.
Household management and introductory car care.
Is it,
Good.
go ahead, Megan.
No, I just was saying, I think that's good.
Is there a facility in the school where they could do cooking or?
Yes, it's not as lovely as historically when you had dedicated home economics classrooms. I mean, the life skills room has a pretty dedicated kitchen facility because they've been using it.
Right.
In the Reach classroom, there is a smaller kitchen unit that can be accessed. We've thought about talking with our Boys and Girls Club partner to see if that's even a possibility. They're 80-minute classes and they have dedicated community kitchen facilities there, but we have not had that conversation with them. So we don't know if that's an opportunity or not during the school day. We wouldn't want to assume that it is. But we do have a couple spaces in the building. We don't think we can access our school nutrition service kitchens. Those are dedicated
Right.
for school nutrition
Right.
purposes. So there's no assumption of using that for this. So it would be small scale. But honestly, some of our students are looking for small scale
Yeah, it's
themselves.
pretty basic stuff, I'd
Yeah,
imagine.
using a hot pot,
Yeah.
so which is just like a stovetop, right? And we do have a stove, an
Meal
oven.
prep.
And some basic nutrition and food preparation practices.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome.
awesome.
I think it's interesting that they're asking for it.
It is. and
Because
it-
remember when we got rid of this a few,
Yeah.
10, 15, 20 years
Right.
ago? We don't need that.
Yeah.
My mother-in-law well, they called it consumer science, right?
yeah.
That's what home economics was, but she was a home economics teacher for 33 years.
Wow.
So I'm intimately familiar with the requirements of what it takes, and this isn't it required a lot of the home economics teachers had a lot of skill in science, in nutritional science, and they took organic chemistry like every other science teacher. So this is a much more light touch version, but some skills the students are specifically requesting.
Well, and that's the thing, I mean, that's what you're saying, right, that the students are asking for it, and I'm glad we are listening and hearing that, and that it's something that they're noticing, hey, this is something we
Yeah.
need. I absolutely want to preserve the curiosity, right, of learning, support that, when we hear that they have that, let's do that, and it's totally you can use that
And
tomorrow.
if we went back to, I did actually go back to our strategic listening sessions for working on the board's strategic plan. A fair number of community members, we have recordings of those, said we used to have home economics, the kids really should have home economics. I mean, so many, it was a trend in when AI ran through the data. So this is
When we
I
did our,
think it's important to
when we did our
recognize that.
school tours, one of the board members said, "Where's the home ec room? I took that and I still sew and I still cook." And it happened to be a man. And to me, that was more powerful. I mean, he valued what he had learned in that class, continues to value it.
Yeah, yeah, I remember mine.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So that's an addition in that department. Career education is next. It looks like there's a lot of changes. I just want to walk you through this really quickly. Remember, career ed, they have to take a credit in career education. A half a credit has to be in career readiness, career and college readiness. A half a credit has to be in financial education. So what we've done now is, because we reduced a career education teacher by one through attrition, someone retired. So now there's a little bit more pressure on this one individual to meet all these credit requirements for students. So we've looked across our system to see like, where is this also offered and how can we be flexible, again, pathways for students so they get the core content, but maybe there's a few options. So in the career readiness part, students can take what used to be called Life and Work 1 or has been called Career and Technology or College and Career. We've had so many names for the same course. So we just boiled it down to Career and Technology. It's like, that's like, they actually do some taxes there. They do like, what interests do you have and what might that look like for a career or college? That's the exploration course. Or they can take JMG, Brittany Giro is our teacher there, their career readiness semester. And they both do the same thing, just slightly different version of the same thing. And that will allow students to have a little bit more flexibility and reduce the workload impact on our one career educator. Then their other half credit has to be financial education. So we've created 3 pathways for that. What has always been called Life and Work is now being called Personal Finance Literacy. So the 20% project still exists, but it's going into Career and Technology, where we think the age group of students would like it, and it makes more sense. Like, what are your interests in career? What are your interests in college? Either pathway is fine. That's where you're going to do your 20% project. So you can explore your interests. So then Personal Finance Literacy is that option. It's otherwise known as Life and Work. JMG has a financial fitness semester, very strong course, and it's exactly what personal finance is, but just a slightly different approach. And personal finance math, which you had approved as,
We just locked the door upstairs. Do you have your key?
Mhm.
Okay. I want to make sure you weren't gonna be locked
Okay.
out of upstairs.
thanks.
All right, have a good night.
Financial algebra, you approved that course last year. We added 1 unit into financial algebra from the original coursework. And now it meets the requirements of our personal finance literacy course. So the math department agreed to have that we just changed the title, personal finance math. It's the same exact course. So now students who really love math might actually take that as their personal finance. And then there's the electives. JMG changed some of the names and semester-based versions, so those are there. Freshman seminar, Foundations for My Future and Discover Your Future. So those updates are reflected in red. So really not huge changes, just mapping out better what we already offer, and really thinking about what's the core purpose and giving kids a little bit more flexibility with how they achieve that outcome. And so that's all listed. Wellness is next. No significant changes. RISE had no changes yet, although there's a couple things they have in the works that they'd like to work through, but I don't know that we'll get to that this year. That's our alternative ed. Life skills, no changes, and Capital Tech Center. We didn't recognize any significant changes. It does not yet include exploratory programming for Capital Tech Center because we're not yet ready to do that. So we will add that as an amendment if that gets prepared.
And that exploratory, if we get there, is that they would get exposed to or access to several of the portals.
Yeah, 4 programs in 9th and or 10th grade year, depending on how we map that out, but we are just not ready to yet, but we'd like to try to look into that this winter, spring, so that we can be prepared. So, any other questions about the program of studies as a unit? We tried to make it a little more manageable this year by breaking it apart. Okay, so if you don't have questions, I do need a motion to approve it.
I would make a motion to approve the program of studies.
And a second,
I'll second.
and a vote. In favor, unanimous, great. Okay, one more thing. I appreciate that, everyone. That was a big lift. Okay, the elementary behavior response proposal, that is this colorful MTSS document in front of you. I'm gonna try to do this as efficiently as possible. As you're aware, through our board workshop, we are one of our trends or patterns that we're having challenges in is responding to the student behavioral regulation challenges. Not the typical everyday stuff, but we have students coming in with more significant needs and younger, mostly in the K-2 environment. And we're really struggling with our response system. We're definitely working really hard individually, but like as a system, we're not very cohesive and we need to do some work. So a committee's been working, they're made up teachers, ed techs, and administrators from across all 4 elementary schools with me since October. And they made this proposal. And what this is the first few slides just really illustrate how MTSS under academics is really well developed. And what does that mean? It means every child has access to core instruction. When they start to struggle, they have access to supplemental support. And when they have significant gaps, they have access to intensive support like Learning Lab, Title I, or their accelerated REACH, the Gifted and Talented Program, and credit recovery. Okay. On the behavior side, especially at the elementary level, we don't have that mapped out as well. So we've mapped that out here, what that looks like. We have universal instruction in how we, classroom expectations, how we work with each other, how we resolve conflict, how we manage ourselves in space with social settings, all those things. Some students need a little supplemental support. They get a little bit of intervention instruction, specific instruction on how to do that, how to engage like that. They get movement breaks with specialized staff. They have check-in, check-out practices, which sort of helps them prep their minds and their bodies for the day, and then reflect at the end of the day so that they get routine about how the day goes during school, and they process some stuff that might be bubbling up so it doesn't bubble up more. And now what we're saying is for this intensive support, we don't have a formalized system at all at the elementary level. That's system. We have formalized responses for individuals, but it's inefficient and it's taxing, and our staff is very stressed and our families are stressed and our schools are stressed. So we needed to come up with a response. So here we do engage with restorative practices, helping students learn, grow, that, we do have disciplinary practices that came up with the board workshop, but that doesn't help teach kids new things it just says what that happened was wrong. So we're trying to come up with some alternative instruction. And we also, of course, have social work support. But again, that needs to often be coupled with other strategies because you need the intensity every day across the days rather than social work meets with a child once every few days or once a week. It's just not enough, even though it's great. So we have this really complex flow chart for academics, and it helps you decide all the decision-making pathways. And so what we did is we started looking at the behavior side, working backwards. Sometimes people are like, well, why don't children just go to like the behavior program at Helen Thompson if they're having trouble with behavior? Well, that is special ed. You have to be identified, and it takes a very rigorous process to get to that place. And we don't just stick kids in an alternative space unless they've already tried all kinds of other things, right? And we need all kinds of other things to be systematized. So this slide just talks about how in special education on the academic side, before someone's identified, we go through a series of steps to try to narrow the identify the problem, narrow the skill set to like, what is it that we still can't figure out how to resolve, and how can we use specially designed instruction to do that? And that's where special ed comes in. So you narrow this process down so that we're efficient with students. So the next one is, we need to do that with behavior. And so IDEA from special education is explicit that behavior is an educational issue when it interferes with learning. In the case of a child whose behavior impedes the child's learning or that of others, we have to use positive behavioral interventions and supports and other strategies to address that behavior. We are, but again, not systematized enough right now. Schools are legally expected to teach and support behavior, not simply respond with discipline. That is a misconception a lot of people feel, like just discipline them, it will be fine. Well, we are, and it's not working. And we're trying to teach and it's not systematized, and so we're just burning staff out. And for students, it's like we're trying to maintain their dignity and help them learn the skills they need to be effective in the social setting. They're stressed out and we need to get better at responding. So IDEA, which is federal legislation, emphasizes positive evidence-based interventions, and it applies whether or not a student has an IEP. So that's important, that we are required to do this for all students. We want to, I'm just legitimizing it here through this process. So that means we need to teach replacement behavior, which takes time, specialized staff, and time for the kid to process, practice, and then apply it in a traditional classroom setting. We need to adjust environments and instruction so that we reduce the stress so the student's able to learn, practice, apply in a more stressful situation, which is often when they're in socialized settings. Reinforce positively the appropriate behavior. Use a consistent adult responses. So we need staff who can support the right general ed teachers who are having students in their classrooms. And then of course, match the intervention or that instruction to the function of the behavior. So we need to be able to identify, is this a trauma response? Is it a regulation response? Is it an avoidance response? There's like 4 categories we can really work through. And that exclusionary practices alone, like suspension, removal, and isolation, do not meet the IDEA's intent or requirements. Another emphasis that yes, disciplinary procedures are important and we will continue to follow through with them, but they alone don't meet legal requirements and don't meet the student's needs, and therefore we're not building the capacity of the student to be successful.
Sorry, could you go back for the matching interventions with the function of behavior? Avoidance was the only one.
Avoidance, trauma response, physical regulation response, kind of like your nervous system, physical regulation. And there's a 4th one, and I just can't
that's fine.
recall it
It's
right
fine, I've got
now
3
in
out of
my
4, that's
mind.
good.
I have them listed somewhere, but there's more. There's a lot, but those are the 4 that we typically work through. Oh, here it is: skill-based response. So, MTSS, this process of identification, instruction, monitoring for progress, is not a gatekeeper for a student accessing an IEP or going through the special ed referral process at all. But it is a required framework that schools need to follow, as no matter if there's a referral or not a referral, okay? So before or during a referral, teams need to know what behavioral need was identified, what interventions were matched to the need, what was the function of the behavior, did the student respond, and if not, what additional intensity was attempted. This is just like the academic side. If they're not reading, why are they not reading? Is it a morphology issue? Is it a fluency? You know, like what is the issue? Then what do we do to teach? And then is it working or not? Why is it working? What are we going to do differently for this? Same thing with behavior. The challenge is, we didn't go to school to learn this. Teachers went to school to teach academics. They know some classroom management skills. They've gotten really skillful at being responsive, managing themselves, regulating themselves, coming up with new strategies. We've had lots and lots of training. And they have a room full of 20-something kids, right? And they're trying to manage this. So the proposal is that we have every elementary building has a dedicated alternative flexible space exactly like Title I, which is you have to go through a rigorous process of identification You have to have tried things in the classroom first. You have to have documentation and progress monitoring. And if the student needs intensive supports after all that, and it's clear and it's a team-based decision through MTSS, the process we use for MTSS, then a student doesn't leave their classroom 100% of the time, has dedicated intervention time. And that time can be flexible when, like this child, every day at 10:30, it's the challenge. So at 10:15, this child's gonna spend some time with a dedicated staff member who's skillful in this, trained in this, in a low stakes, low stress environment. So the classrooms, the alternate space is comfortable, has flexible use, can engage students through their interests to teach them new skills. So there might be some planting of plants going on in there, might be some cooperative gameplay going on in there. There might be some math learning going on in there, but in a lower stakes environment where we then teach skills that will help them when they get frustrated. That's the avoidance behavior. When they get frustrated, what are you going to practice doing yourself in this environment? And we're going to get good at that. And then you're going to go back to your classroom. And when you get frustrated in your classroom, you're going to try those things. And that teacher is going to know what it is you're trying and is going to help you, right? So it's this back and forth, back and forth. So we don't have that option right now. So the parameters are, if the proposal is it had to meet our mission that every student matters. It had to adhere to the strategic plan, not conflict with the instructional leadership model we're trying to develop, support the requirements of multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS, allow for consistent decision-making across the district, meaning not 4 different approaches in 4 different ways. We need some consistency and we need a system. Be a sustainable budget inclusive of staffing as much as possible and include a training plan, right? We can't expect staff just to know what to do. When we conducted our gap analysis at tier 1, that's core classroom, we have evidence-based curriculum already in place to help teach all these things. Teachers are using it. There could be a little bit more implementation strengthened in a few hotspots, so we're working on that. Coherence is needed with tier 2 strategies. Mostly what we learned is greater documentation of what's working and access to that. The committee's working on that. We have a continuum now, and we're now finishing it up. And then we need this tier 3 intensive instruction. It's significantly lacking due to staffing, skill, and space. So this is our response. So I already talked about continuum support, progress monitoring tools, and what staff need. I will add at the core level, tiers 1 and 2, where most of the things happen around classrooms. The staff do continually request school counselors back in the budget at the elementary level, because that is where a lot of that early stuff before the intensive support of social workers. I wanted to name that. It's not in this proposal at this moment, but I want to name it as something that does routinely come up.
How long ago were they?
4 years,
I thought
5
with
years ago?
COVID, we brought back more
We
action.
increased social workers, and now we have a
Okay.
social worker, at least one in every building. And they're full at capacity,
Mhm.
including all of our contracted social workers. Well, we're not contracting them, but access to spur-wing social workers in our buildings as well are fully maxed out. Everyone's maxed out. And so with the intensive social work needs. And so there isn't a lot of like core supplemental classroom instruction beyond the classroom teacher. Like guidance counselors, school counselors were able to provide at the elementary level. And then they also did some small groups that were not intensive, like social work, where it's one-on-one or a small group in a very intensive way.
Social work meets more that tier 3, and I think it says it right here,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
And school counselors is really tier 1 and 2.
Yes, there's a-
Weekly instruction in
Okay.
1.
There's a
Tier
bridge
2
that's not
bridge.
there right now.
It's true.
And
We used to have 2 school counselors across 4 buildings. One retired, and when that person retired, we actually eliminated school counselors and increased social workers, which at the time were desperately needed, and we had to make a trade-off because we didn't have a budget to support adding more. I just want to be realistic and name it. I don't want to hide the fact that that is a continuous discussion. This is getting to the tier 3, which is our biggest gap analysis. Alternative learning space. It's a safe space. There's clear instruction, as I discussed, with a trained individual. Allows students to co-regulate, learn the new skills, often apply them in some sort of learning opportunity, but it might be something that they're learning that kids are interested in, as opposed to mandatory and then slowly working towards something a non-preferred task. Let's try to do the skill in a task you don't prefer to do and see how you do. Space it's not considered like a label. It's not for an explosive situation. If a student is so dysregulated, they're tearing apart a room or trying to elope from the building, we have a safety care crisis response team, and they will follow the protocols and support the student, and it's not for this space. I want to be super clear about that. And it's not a punitive space for learning. To make this happen, this flexible staff space, where they will learn regulation and replacement skills. I have them all bulleted out there, and generalized planning, visual scripts, tools that travel with the student, practicing skills before they return, and then all those skills. We need to have an EdTech 3 per elementary building that's specialized in behavior. How can we fund this? This is the hard part. It's either a new EdTech 3 position, depending on the building, or where it's appropriate, shifting a district EdTech 1 into a 3, which is a much more efficient cost measure for us. But we can't do that in every building, because not every district EdTech 1 that's currently employed with us, that are very valuable staff members and are very busy, qualify for an EdTech 3 or qualify for an EdTech 3 in behavior.
Or want this position.
Thank you. So this is the part, like Andrea's favorite story is when I'm like, it's not super clean cut, but the room won't work unless we have an EdTech 3. It has to be a 3. It can't be any lower. Who's willing to be in that space? So we would need to be clear. Riverview has an open district EdTech 1 position that's being filled by 2 basically long-term substitutes. So could we potentially shift their EdTech 1 to a 3 without impacting jobs? Yep. We may have another place where there's that opportunity, but I don't know that we have that across the board right now, and I won't know yet. It's too early in the year to know about next year. And then what I'd also prefer is that a staff member, a teaching staff member who's already skillful in this, earns a stipend to help facilitate cohesion across the district by being their instructional leader. So in the curriculum budget, I would have extra curriculum pay, hourly pay, that these EdTech 3s would meet monthly after school with this stipended behavior coordinator to ensure that they're trained, their practices are consistent, they have a go-to person for responsive feedback. I would coordinate with the behavior coordinator as well. And they'll get some early release time that's already built in the day, right? So it's not just 1 month, it'll also be plus early release time that's built into their calendar. And they would get paid to go, because EdTechs aren't paid right now to go to staff meetings. They would also go to the once a month staff meeting in their building, because that's a big touch point between teaching staff and EdTechs, and EdTechs don't go to staff meetings typically. And I think that this person is going to have so much intersection with teaching staff, they need to be at the staff meeting. And it's a great opportunity for them to also help conduct some training or partner with someone to conduct some training to ensure consistency and open lines of communication. That hourly pay is not a significant bump in my budget. The significant bump really would be in whether or not the EdTech 3 has to be a new position in the budget. But conceptually, what I'd like is conceptually a vote of support for this model to see if we can flesh it out in the budget rather than a barrier. And then other budget considerations, these spaces don't exist Every principal has looked whether they could create a space in their building, and they can. But to make it functional, to have a little bit of money set aside for flexible seating, so this isn't really the room where we sit with a chair attached to a desk. This is a room where we might have some of those little stools that wiggle around, and, you know, just a little bit more flexibility so we can move the room around based on what the needs are for those kids. And we just don't have that already in our schools. And some supplies, specifically hands-on instructional material, project materials, curriculum that's for this level, tier 3 intensive. There, it's not super expensive, but it is money. And then just general supplies like those targeted cooperative games. This is not playtime, just to be clear. If there's a game, it's specific to helping them learn how to communicate with another individual when that is their stressor. That's the point where they escalate in the classroom. We need to give them, these are strategic games that we use. They're not just life or sorry or whatever those games are. They're specific for the purpose of what we're trying to do. But that has to come out of somewhere so that the room would have a line in each building to secure those. And it would be consistent across the district by age group. So that's the proposal. In concept.
I think this is critically needed. The idea of not supporting these children, the outcome of where this could lead is just not good at all. And I know that our taxpayers are gonna say, why do you need this? We didn't have this when I went to school. And I think we need to be prepared to have a short but convincing argument. I
The
get it.
number of dangerous student behavior complaints that we're getting is significant alone. On top of the fact that these poor children, their parents, no one wants this for these children. They're just under the conditions of school. No matter how many modifications we've made, they're stressed to the point that they are unable to cope in the classroom. And this is a student who's exploding will have another space. But when they're not exploding, or before they get to that point, they have this structured learning environment with a skillful staff member who can help them reduce that level of stress that they're constantly in, so that they can learn the skills they need to cope in these settings that they're really struggling with, which alone will help our staff feel supported, them being less stressed. And the burnout we are experiencing, I'm sure it's all over Facebook, but burnout we're experiencing is pretty high in some of our unique situations. And these are lovely little people. They just don't have the skill set they need. And everyone's trying. Families are trying, school is trying, community members are trying. We need direct, explicit instruction with a staff member who's available and skilled.
And a chance to practice that.
Practice.
Right, because,
Safely.
speed comes slowly, with anything.
It's like tying your shoes takes time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I understand that some of these children may come from a home that is similar to the behaviors that they're displaying. But is there a family component at all in this?
So if students qualify for social work, there's often a family component in the social work
Okay.
part of it. We would have parent-teacher conferences like we do with everything.
Right.
We would have them here. I think we'd have, the classroom teacher plus the Ed Tech 3. They're not going to need to be on their own, working together with the family. That would be part of the MTSS plan. What I didn't print off, I meant to, we actually made a decision-making guide. And then very spelled out, and in it includes family engagement. There is the family has to be part of this ongoing decision-making process. They get to come to all the meetings, almost like a mini IEP referral, but not the legalese around it. But we think that's important. There should be no surprises. And the families should feel, hopefully the intent is for them to feel supported. Like, we're in this together.
Not
We're all
criticized.
trying to help this young person feel safe and ready to learn.
Some of these kids are on lists waiting for
Yeah.
help outside of school. So.
Yep.
Right, so it's a full,
It's-
it's a
yeah.
full spectrum.
Right.
Yeah.
Support effort.
Yeah, and I mean, I think on the other side, there's families where they have children in a classroom where they know they've heard there's a child that's struggling, and they're concerned about their own children, and we need a more responsive system to make sure they also feel like, of course, we don't want to stigmatize this child. We're going to be with this child for 13 years. But we also want to know that the school has built a system that's more effective.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think the other part of this is that these situations are somewhat new.
Oh, it's the last few years, like
And
2
so
years that we're really struggling.
it's not that we were negligent. We
Right.
have a changing population that require things that in general, the population didn't need before. And now we need to meet the changing population's needs.
And especially in the early elementary ages, like that's not a common experience in the early elementary, and it is becoming more common, and that is still so shocking for us. So we're trying to be responsive as much as we possibly can.
So this provides, support for, the individual student having that challenge, but also kind of gives, relieves some pressure from the teacher, the faculty in the room, and then also from the other students, allows them to like kind of return to learning with as little interruption.
Trauma.
I was wondering about the other
Exactly.
students though,
manage that.
also, what kind of, like, to avoid a stigma or oh, they're bad and they're going to the quiet room or what, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
like, how can we make it so that
Well,
everybody in the class knows it's there
if
and
you
that
see the
it's.
picture, right? I mean,
Right.
it's a desirable space, so
Right.
that's important. It's not punitive, it is desirable. Kids are going to
Gonna
want to
wanna
be
go
in there.
Right.
So I think that's important. I think it's staff culture, like knowing why and how and the language you use around the room is going to matter. Students receive a lot of support. Lots of students receive lots of support. They have speech support. They have OTPT support. They have and they have Title I math and literacy. They have I don't know. There's a million things that students have access to, and so a lot of times kids are in and out of classrooms. We have schedules to try to make sure they're always in for reading and they're always in for math. But every so often, there's still an adjustment that's made. So I think it's the idea of a stigma might be actually reduced significantly, especially if the child is becoming more successful at being in the general classroom space without lots and lots of support, right? And I think we get more of a stigma when, one, you need someone there with you 24/7, or you're struggling and it's visible, right? And that's embarrassing. And so we really want to create this space where they feel they're struggling less often, they're being successful, they're building friendships, they're using the skills. I mean, to me, that's just so they may have a little bit of time outside the classroom, but a lot of kids do. And if it means they're so much more successful every time they're in the classroom, I think the trade-off is worth it.
Oh, yeah. Building community connections to navigate a healthy and productive future is so, having a person looking at a kid who's in crisis maybe, or on the verge of crisis, and just having that one-on-one attention can be so.
And we did consult with a couple other districts who have similar models. That's where we kind of explored in the region. We explored that a little. We'd like to do a field trip, just to get a better sense of it, because they've been doing it a little longer than us. And we were like, okay, it's working. Let's see, how could we make it work here under our context and our situation? So it's not a replication, but it definitely drew from a few other systems because everyone's having these challenges. Everyone is, and everyone's responding a little differently. So we tried to find some that looked and felt more like us, that we knew they were a year or two down the road already, a year down the road, really, all of them, and said, okay, you're halfway through your year. How's it going? How's it feeling? What's working? What is it? And we drew from that to help us design this. So it didn't just come out of the dark.
It seems really well thought out and is designed to meet a need, right, that we're seeing like kind of more and more these days. Is there, I imagine there would be a plan for like, the person kind of, walking with the student, to the next space and then coming back. Is there a plan on how to convey like what they worked on for them to convey to the teacher?
Yeah, we're gonna have a
what to
little
look for?
form
Yeah.
that we're gonna use for communication purposes. So the design guide, the decision-making guide. We have a
Yeah.
design guide, then we have a decision-making guide. The decision-making guide actually requires all that. And it also requires how a student will re-enter the classroom. What are the steps and the strategies that every person the person from the alternative space, the student, the teacher will go through to ensure that it's smooth, respectful, you know, and sets the student up for success back in the general space. Yeah.
Yeah, cool, yeah.
And they'll have to do a tier 3 intervention form. So that helps us with our data tracking that's like the academic side of things that no one really wants to know about, but we have to do anyway. So that will be part of it too. And that's another communication vehicle internally.
Yeah, helps us or helps the staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, determine what they're doing and what's working,
Yeah.
or if it's not, you know, and maybe they're at Fidelity and something's still not working, so that would tell us something too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like, as students exit, they meet their criteria, we celebrate it with the student, we formally exit them, we make sure the family knows that this is a great moment. They've built their skill set.
I think it's great.
So what's the proposal? I would move that we support the intervention system for the behavior response proposal.
Yeah, second.
Yeah.
And only other thing I would throw in, yeah, if we can do it, like if we have ed tech ones that we can move to ed tech 3s that want to do it, that have the background for it, all that. Yes, let's obviously
Yeah.
do our due diligence on finding those people in the district already, or if we have to move something around.
It would be cool to have somebody that the kids already know.
But yes, it would be good to build that way. Just as the exploratory piece, but I would want to support going ahead with this.
Okay, so Linda motion, then I added that note, and who's the second? Tony, and then vote in favor. Unanimous. Oh, we did it, folks. Yay.
Did it?
3:35 we started. 4:46 we ended, 10 minutes over.
Yeah.
1 hour mark.
That just shows we were thorough.
Oh, yeah, that was,
Thorough. Thank you.
that was a
Really
good pace.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
Thank you for your preparation and yeah.
thank you. Thanks for stepping in.